Hello and welcome. I hope you'll stay tuned today. I have two excellent guests. Professor Katie Moleski and instructor Cory Schierberl will be discussing the sports and exercise program here at the University of Rio Grande and Rio Grande Community College. Hope to see you later today. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Richard Sachs, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of Rio Grande and Rio Grande Community College in beautiful southeastern Ohio. And I'm delighted today that my guests are the two full-time faculty from our Sports and Exercise Studies program. I've got Katie Moleski, an Assistant Professor of Sports and Exercise Studies, and Cory Schierberl, an instructor of Sports and Exercise Studies. Katie joined us in about 2012, I think, right? And has a bachelor's and master's degree from Ohio University, and she's a PhD pre-candidate at Ohio U, doing a very fascinating project that we're all interested in about student success with JV athletes, among other things. Dr. Schierberl joined us just last year, bachelor's and master's from Ohio State, and an EDD from the U.S. Sports Academy. So again, what they're focused on is the Sports and Exercise Studies major, which, believe it or not, I think is just about our fourth or fifth largest major out of 71 majors here. So this has been a real growth program that Katie has developed, and Cory's come on, and he's hit the ground running as well. I'd like you both to talk a little bit about your backgrounds and how you ended up in this position. But again, the way we market the program is this is a good degree for people who want to work in fitness centers, people who want to market sports and exercise products. I think one of the most fascinating things as I look over the major is the 100-hour senior year internship that provides 4 credit hours, gives students experience and a reference point even before they graduate. So ladies first and hierarchy first, since Katie's in her 7th year. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the program, and then we'll move on to Dr. Schierberl?
How I got to the program, or into the field?
I think it's all fascinating, and I'm sure our fans would be interested.
So I started my undergraduate degree at Ohio University in Rec and Sports Sciences with a focus on exercise physiology. I loved the combination of science and sports. It certainly made sense to me as a former athlete. And so I wanted to go on to get my master's degree, and so I ended up in clinical exercise physiology, working on a master's program. I, in that program, did internships in cardiac recovery, working in cardiopulmonary rehabilitation, stress testing labs. But I actually got my first gig in teaching at Hocking College just as an adjunct professor, and that one class turned into multiple programs, and then I ended up here at the university. And so I saw an opportunity to sort of update the curriculum when I got here and to take on a more sports science model. So that's what I initially did in 2012, which has really, as you said, grown. It's kind of caught fire and taken on, and I think that the sports science field is an attractive field for students because there's so many different career options and routes. It's not just one thing that students can do with that degree. And so we have graduates that go on to graduate programs in physical therapy school. I have 2 current students who just got into Marshall for PT program, and so that's been a real positive thing to see. And also, just working as an exercise physiologist in clinical settings, and then Cory's sort of wheelhouse is strength and conditioning type of space.
Okay, so I don't believe I haven't asked you this, and I've known you for 5 years. What was your sport? I'm feeling like a distance runner or
No.
a two-guard in basketball.
I was a softball player.
Softball player, really? What position?
Well, in high school I caught, and then in college I played the outfield.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Dr. Schierberl, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I guess I'll get the sports out of the way first. So in high school, I played football and ran track. And then into college, so for my undergrad, I actually went to Ohio State. My master's, I went to Ohio University.
Oh, okay.
And I was on the boxing team there, the club team. I was way too small to play football at even a small school like that. I'm only 5'8". But the boxing team provided me that same camaraderie and team atmosphere. So that was my main sport. And then as I went on to my graduate school and doctoral program, there were no longer a boxing team at the university, so I went into a brief 2 to 3 year career in MMA.
Wow.
People may know it as cage fighting, but it's kind of a brutal term for it. It's actually a very highly disciplined sport.
So it's mixed martial arts. Is that
yes.
right? Okay.
So if you've seen UFC fighting, it's essentially that. But as an amateur, like I was on the amateur level, you're not allowed to knee or elbow to the face. You can only knee to elbow to the rest of the body, and the only thing that can touch your face is a fist. Okay. So eventually, when I went to school long enough, I figured I should stop getting punched in the head. So that's kind of what ended my combat career in athletics. I guess I could start from the beginning real fast, just an overview of the academics that brought me to sitting in this room. I was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, went to a tiny high school. It's called Grandview Heights High School, and went to Ohio State after that. I majored in the major. I had no idea what I wanted to do, like many freshmen really don't. So I actually chose my major based on the one that had the least amount of math classes required, because that was not my forte. Science, I'd knock out of the park. History, I loved. And it ended up being nutrition and community health, believe it or not. I only had to take, I believe, intro to stats and a basic algebra class. And, I got by them. So did that, graduated, didn't know what I wanted to do still. Had a little bit of a break, so I did a little research on whether I wanted to go into the career the field at that point and start practicing in the profession, or if I wanted to go back to school. Decided on school. So I went to Ohio University, did my master's degree in coaching education due to playing sports my whole life and seeing a real gap in the quality of coaches, particularly at the youth level. A lot of the times they're volunteers and they just don't have the training.
Oh, my word.
Yeah.
Oh, you're preaching to the converted.
Yeah, if we have time.
I've got 5 kids. I've done so much youth coaching.
Oh, we can come back to that for sure. I'll talk about that all day.
The crazy dads who are trying to live through their kids. It's horrible.
Yes. It's traumatizing, ends to people quitting sports at a sooner date. It's all bad. So I studied that for 2 years. Did a little bit of side consulting work with high schools as far as analyzing and assessing and evaluating their coaching programs and things like that. From there, went into actually doing something as far as using my education. I worked for the United States Army. Technically, I worked for a contracting company that was contracted by the U.S. Army. It was about a $33 million contract. Our job was to travel around the country and the world to train United States soldiers on essentially 1-month versions of the sports and exercise studies program.
Wow.
Obviously, that's quite hard to do because we only had about 20 instructional days, but at the point they were at, as far as every individual soldier knowing what they're doing, it was far better than the state that they were currently in. But like all contracts, they end. Took about 2 years for the contract to run out of money. Did a lot of great stuff. Said, do I want to go back into contracting? Do I want to go back into the fitness industry and manage a gym? I decided, no, I want to go back to school and be a professor. So I went back and did my doctorate. That took 2.5 to 3 years, I believe. At the same time, I got to teach some undergraduate courses, which helped pay for my schooling. And finished that 2 years ago. And the only thing between that and this was about a 1-year contract out in Seattle, where I was the athletic performance director for the women's professional basketball team out there, Seattle Storm. So I guess it's kind of interesting that all 3 of my degrees between nutrition, coaching, and sports management, they're kind of all intertwined and covered within our exercise and sports studies program. And then my career path has also shown how you could have so many different jobs with those type of subjects covered in your curriculum. So that's why I'm here.
Well, that's fascinating. So it's interesting. I know you both probably know we just approved esports to start in fall of 2020. And one thing that I and Athletic Director Lanham have learned as we've studied esports is it's not just computer science majors, that people across the board are gaming. Your provost does not game. The last game I played was Pong, and I love playing Pong. It's essentially tennis. But I don't get the gaming, but I know it's very popular and it goes across all areas. In sports and exercise, though, are most of your majors college athletes, or were they at least high school athletes? Because it seems to me that athletes would be drawn to that kind of profession. So either agree with that or tell me why that's an incorrect inference.
I wouldn't say that they're all athletes. I would say that they have an interest in healthy lifestyle, fitness, proper nutrition, so that doesn't necessarily mean athlete. And I say that because there's this whole allied health space to our
Sure.
field. It's not just, oh, you only work with athletes, so you have to be an athlete in order to do that. That physical therapy space and graduate work in ex-phys are working in a clinical type of setting, so people who just have sort of an interest within healthy lifestyles, fitness, but not necessarily competitive athletes. In my mind, those are two separate things. So no, I don't think that you have to just be an athlete. I think that there's a natural relationship between athletics and sports and exercise studies. But we do have a population of students within our current program who are not athletes or student athletes, even at campus, or even necessarily former athletes, but just have an interest in health and fitness, I think.
Yeah.
So they're not just gym rats,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I went to Ohio State, and I was one class away that got all messed up from minoring in exercise science, so I was in a lot of the Ohio State exercise science courses, and I graduated with the largest graduating class in the history of mankind, like ever in the world. It was 8,500 people was our class. Now, obviously, our school was much smaller, but so I would have 50 to 60, almost the size of some of the programs on campus in one exercise science class. And at Ohio State, the vast majority of people are not athletes.
Oh,
so,
sure.
Yeah, so the people in there, they may have had an interest in health and wellness. They may have played some sports in high school, but yeah, it is definitely not an athlete-only major. There was probably a handful of athletes in there, and they were probably, honestly, the ones that were not that interested. So it was really interesting.
Yeah. Now, I've come to nutrition later in life, and I have a physique that proves it. But, as a younger man, when I was a college athlete, a D3 basketball player, and then playing a lot of, in 3 or 4 pickup leagues in my 20s and 30s and 40s, and I realized later than I should have that if I just eat the steak and the baked potato at night, I feel pretty rotten in the morning. Or if I get up and instead of just having fruit and yogurt, I stop at Twinkleberries and eat, 3 to 5 donuts. I just feel rotten. And as a 19-year-old, I didn't feel that way at all. And I often see, I'm not going to call out any names, but I'll see female cross-country runners hoofing down the donuts at 7 in the morning at Twinkleberries, and they are skinny as rails, and I feel like telling them, you won't be able to do that at 30, or you won't be able to do that at 35, but I didn't have some old middle-aged provost telling me that then, so I don't want to tell them that now. But it really seems like there's such an appreciation for nutrition across the board. I mean, in our labeling, in so many things now that we do. And in a way, you guys are on the cusp of that movement, right? For wellness and things like that. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the larger population is gaining an appreciation for prevention, right? In healthcare specifically, if we can prevent things through proper lifestyle, including diet and physical activity, then you don't have to pay for them down the road in the form of doctor's visits and medication, and that's science, that's proven stuff, that we can prevent a lot of lifestyle diseases down the road. And so, I think from an employer perspective, it's better to have healthy employees rather than to pay for healthcare. And so investing in that type of stuff, I think is going to become more common, and is a growing place, is a growing space within our field. Wellness coaching and that type of stuff, I think, will continue to grow in the future because the cost of healthcare is spiraling. And so if we can just not use it, it makes more sense.
It's interesting. I have my family and I, we've been going to Cleveland Clinic for years, so even though I'm 240 miles away, I still use my doctors and make sure that I can get up there for it. And Cleveland Clinic, at least a year or two ago, not only said its employees are not allowed to smoke, but you are not allowed to smoke anywhere, anywhere, not in the parking lots at Cleveland Clinic. So to me, that's such a different perspective because, you know, my bachelor's degree is from 1978, my master's degree from 1979, and back then, professors smoked in the classrooms. They would lecture back and forth as they were smoking.
Wow.
And when I've told my 3 adult kids who are all college grads, they go, "You're crazy, you're not that old." I go, "No, I am that old, that we did that there were people smoking on elevators in the 70s with other people on the elevator, and that wasn't considered rude."
The airplane ashtray?
Yeah, the airplane
ashtray.
Well, and that was the most absurd thing. The last 4 rows are smoking, like 24 to 27 smoking, but 23 is not. And sometimes people would walk back there and stand in the aisle and smoke. Like, it's all the same air. You know, it's going to be the same air till we land. So that's an interesting, and I shouldn't complain about this, but I'm going to. I live in downtown Gallipolis, right next to the Elks Club. Apparently, you're not allowed to smoke inside at the Elks Club, because I guarantee you, you go within 30 feet of my door, if you cannot find 100 butts, cigarette butts, I will give you $1 for every butt below 100. And it's just like, there's there's even you know, those big ashtrays that they could be using, but they just put the butts there. It blows me away that in some, personally, I think let them smoke inside. It's an Elks Club. It's a private club. Let them smoke. I'd rather that than you know, have people visit me and track in cigarette butts or smell like cigarettes because you're walking through literally a carpet of cigarette butts there. So I'm sorry, I'm just ranting, but I want to hear you guys talk.
Gives us time to think.
Yeah.
To 2 major points that you guys were kind of discussing, the health and wellness aspect, which Katie would be the first to say, you know, that's more her specialty, clinical setting, where I'm more athletic strength conditioning. We both have, you know, abilities to do both, but our major interests and fortes are somewhat different, which really does help with us both being the full-time instructors in the program, so you get exposed to every possible career path at, you know, what we would consider a pretty high level. But what I was talking about, or what I was thinking about, is that you were talking about wellness and health coming full circle. Is, forgive me, I don't have my reference, but the last year or 2, or maybe it was 3 years ago, was the first year that our life expectancy as humans actually went back, or at least within the United States.
Really?
So we actually are expected to die at a sooner age, where before that, as we tracked, it was this a little bit more, and now we're now reverting back to earlier death rates, and then that opens some eyes, especially across the health industry. And you're talking about weight gain and nutrition. I show a video in the nutrition class, and you're talking about prevention. There has been not one single program or method that has been proven to be effective at long-term weight loss. So that's why so much focus is now being shifted to the prevention. So there's a lot of money and attention and media on the weight loss, but as far as making it last for a long, long time over a life, it's extremely hard. Your body resets its set point, you could say, and things get a lot harder. So the preventing piece is huge. So
right. Well, that's excellent. That's good to know. So where do you see the future of this program going? Because whether it's sports and exercise studies, and we're more focused on the science aspect of it and the training and conditioning, or when I was at Lake Erie College with only 1,400 students, we had 120 sports management majors. And I was so worried about that because I thought this tiny college has over 100 sports management majors. They all think they're going to become sports agents. That's not possible, you know. So this is a growth area, everything having to do with sports, and America is so good at sports. I mean, look at all of our major sports. Look at March Madness, which is going to start, you know, next week. One of the most incredible basketball tournaments where, you know, the 64, however many, 66, 68 teams, you know, has a chance to be the national title. And the money and the endorsements are just so, you know, over the top. What kinds of future do you see for the students in our associate program or in our bachelor's program? We've talked about health clubs, we've talked a little bit about marketing, but what kinds of jobs do you see them having, or do you see them getting a secondary credential like the PT people or things like that?
I mean, predict the future. So I think that the future is probably more of as science evolves and says, yes, prevention's the way to go, or this is the impact of technology on the human body and the human condition, right? Because we become more sedentary as technology advances. So, I mean, I see that health, wellness space continuing to expand, and in different ways, figuring out how to use technology to communicate wellness initiatives and prevention type of stuff. I also think that clinical settings will continue to expand as well. So as we have an aging current boomer population, right, that rehab space will continue to grow as well. Because again, keeping people independent and healthy is kind of the overarching goal from a societal standpoint. It's cheaper than to, you know, people become disabled or can't maintain function at home, and so then have to go to long-term care facility and that kind of stuff. So I think that those health and clinical spaces will continue to grow, but I also think that sport is a big business, and so that will likely continue to grow as well. And I think that a sports and exercise degree can be what you want it to be. It is a very large wheelhouse, and so you can use those within our program. We have a practicum experience at the 200 level, so a 30-hour observation, and then the 100-hour internship. And so strategically using those to put yourself into those spaces wherever you want to land. So whether it would be in the sport industry or if it would be in a clinical setting, I think that students who are the most successful upon graduation use those hours the best, or at least figure out what you don't want to do with those hours. And that's another way to approach it as well. So I think this space continues to grow. Esports is going to become a big thing, I think.
But then will your concerns be carpal tunnel syndrome or things
Honestly,
like that?
Yeah, it'll open some more problems.
Or, I mean, think about just the neuroscience aspect of competition, and so managing, what am I trying to say?
Anxiety.
Like anxiety and heart rate. And,
interesting.
You know what I mean? Like being able to approach, I mean, it's a competitive sport from that standpoint, or getting in on the business end of that.
Yeah. Well, it's nice, too, when you can trust the science, because I'm old enough that when I was young, you ate butter because it was healthy and good for you and natural.
Oh, yeah.
And then for about 25 years, it's, no, you got to eat margarine.
Yeah.
And then about 20-some years ago, it's like, oh, margarine's really bad for you. You got to go back to butter. So, and I always like the taste of butter more than the taste of margarine, because margarine just kind of tastes like oil, you know?
Yeah.
But I think sometimes there's skepticism from those of us who are not familiar with the field, saying, you know, do they really know what they're doing? Is this research-based, or is it just beliefs of, oh, butter has fat in it, fat's bad, so we'll cut back on the fat? And then you realize, well, the oleomargarine had other side effects that we weren't aware of at the time.
Nutrition's had a lot longer time for research and practice to get into place, but exercise science as a study and a field are relatively new, you know, compared to psychology. But yeah, it's to the point now where all of our leading journals that we have are the same quality and academic rigor of any other field. For example, everyone used to think that children shouldn't lift weights. That's completely false. They can do it entirely safely. There's never been one documented case of a growth plate injury when there's qualified supervision in place. One example.
I remember my pediatrician telling me that 50 years ago,
The physician.
saying don't do it until you're you're older.
And to the last point, as far as what jobs can you do, I brought just an example of one of our students right now. She just picked up a job as a nursing aide at Holzer, and she came in just this week. She's in my intro to exercise science class, and she said how much of an advantage it was. She already speaks their language in the rehab setting, so her job is to help move people from one bed to here, and she knows how to do flexion, extension, put them in this position, and it's helped her already.
Okay. I don't think Mike has shown any of the pictures yet, so you should throw some of the pictures across. These are some graduates who have graduated recently from sports and exercise studies. But in addition to that, there's going to be another picture that I think Mike has as well. And I'd like Dr. Schierberl to talk a little bit about that project that he's been working on. And we're so very proud of what he's doing.
Sure, that was me this spring break. I went to Arlington National Cemetery. My goal was to personally thank every 400 and something thousand veterans that were buried there. I was raising money for the Rio Veterans Fund. If you go to our website or our alumni website, you can find the link and donate. I didn't get to about half of them, so I'm going to do it next spring break too. But it was an interesting venture, to say the least. So I did 8 days straight. One day it was a wind chill of 15. One day it poured rain, but I had a very nice windsuit. I mean, I was well prepared, and I did it because my great uncle had been shot down in World War II in the invasion in Italy, and when I was contracting for the Army, I got an opportunity to teach a group of soldiers at a base in Italy, and so I took a train ride 2 hours south, and I went there and I saw his grave. And when you see your last name on a veteran's grave, it's very moving. And you know, I was like, I wonder how many people have come to say thanks or like see him in the last, you know, since the war. And I'm like, well, I know my uncle came, but other than that, probably none. And then I thought about, what about Civil War soldiers and Vietnam soldiers and all these graves, 500,000 in Arlington? And I said, even if I stop for 2 seconds at each one, that might be, you know, if they're, depending on whether you believe they're above or whether you believe they're spiritually among us, I think they would appreciate it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's a wonderful thing to do, and there is a link on the rio.edu website to that, right?
Yep.
So, and again, I think this show is one of the reasons why I'm delighted that I devoted my life to higher education, because both these professors have such passion for what they do and also for human beings. I think that's a really central point, that they want us all to become better at what we do and to live fulfilled lives in purposeful vocations. And I think you're both doing a phenomenal job of that. And I love going down to the Line Center and seeing, you know, how you both interact so well with athletes and your own students and things like that.
Thank you.
So again, we have both an associate program and a bachelor's program in sports and exercise studies. Oh wow, that makes my instep hurt, just looking at plantar fasciitis like that. But again, there's some really extraordinary things going on here. And again, I'd like to thank Dr. Schierberl and Professor Moleski for coming on, and again, talking about their sports and exercise studies program here at the University of Rio Grande. So thanks very much, and hope to see you around soon. Thank you, Dr. Schierberl and Professor Moleski.